So I'm here today to talk to you about the Talking Type 1 resources that we have been developing. So as we said, my day job is working with the Wrexham Young Adult Diabetes team, and then another part of my job is developing these resources as part of an All Wales project. So today I'm going to talk to you about what Talking Type 1 is. Hopefully most of you have seen the Diabetes Burnout booklet already, but I imagine some of you haven't, and some of you may have seen it but not really be sure how to use it. So I'm going to be helping you to work through what this might be for, ways that it could be used in your clinic, and my top tips for how to use this effectively. And I'm also going to give you a sneak preview of some of the resources that we've got coming in the pipeline for later this year and next year. So, Talking Type 1, very, very simply, is a range of guided self-help resources that's based on a combination of research, evidence, clinical expertise, and real-life experiences. And it's those real-life experiences that are absolutely key, because these are written specifically for and with people living with diabetes. So from the very, very beginnings of the writing process, it's co-produced with people who live with diabetes and the experiences that are being written about. So we use people that I work with clinically to help us develop the resources, but we also get collaborators from all over the world using platforms like Twitter. So we're getting experiences, we're getting advice, we're getting tips from people living with diabetes wherever they might be. And the beauty of Talking Type 1 is that it is specifically about those issues that you only get when you live with diabetes. So it's not about your generic anxiety, depression, learning to live with a chronic illness. These are those really particular things like burnout, like diabetes distress, like needle phobia, that look very, very different when you're living with type 1. And so what we're trying to do here is to start being able to fill some of that massive, massive gap that we have in the need of psychological support for people who live with these conditions. We've realised quite recently that actually this is the most widely available specialist diabetes psychology intervention in the world. The bar is set very, very low, I need to emphasise that, but there's nothing like this going on around the world in the English language that I could find. And we made it in Wales, so it's something that we should be really, really proud of. So, people that can benefit from Talking Type 1. We're aware, with it having been branded in a similar way to Seren resources, that sometimes people can have the perception that this is just for young adults or this is more for the children's area. It's for any person living with diabetes. So colleagues from adult services, please, please use them, because it's your patient in adult services who will have the least support and will really, really benefit from these. And some of the feedback that we've been getting from these is that actually it's often people in their 40s and 50s who you might think have life sorted, that actually really, really benefit hugely from these. So please use them in your adult clinics. They're designed to help people with mild to moderate difficulties. So it's that when things are just starting to become a problem that they can have the biggest impact. So please don't leave these until someone's at a complete crisis point. You will have the biggest impact early on. We're hoping that they're going to be useful in areas where diabetes psychology support isn't available or there's a massive waiting list. This isn't replacing diabetes psychology. I still need you all advocating and fighting for diabetes psychology. But in areas where it's not there, or we know that it's very, very difficult to access, this can help as a stopgap. They're quite useful, we found, in our young adult clinic particularly, where we have quite a transient population where people are going off to university. So where I might normally have brought somebody in for weekly sessions, if they're going off to Leeds or wherever, that's not possible. So giving them something like this that can then be followed up with a phone call, for example, means that they can still have an intervention. It's also quite handy for those people who I call the disappearing group. So they'll sort of pop up and go, hi, I'm really, really distressed. And then they won't come back. And you can often get a sense, if you've not seen them for a few months and suddenly they appear, that, yeah, I've got 15 minutes with you to make an impact, and then I'm not going to see you for the rest of the year. So for those people, it's quite useful to just be sending them home with something, because you can start opening the door about these conversations and about these issues. They're really useful for family members. So, for example, in paediatric services, they might not be particularly useful for a young child, but for their parents to understand what's going through, it can start those conversations happening, and it can also give parents indicators of what they need to be looking out for and ways that they can support their children as they grow up. And they're really, really useful for staff. So if you've not had access to a diabetes psychologist in your team who can train you on issues like this can be a useful resource for you in terms of your own CPD and knowing what to look out for in your client group. As Chris was saying, it's really, really important that for all diabetes staff, we're all aware of these common issues that people can be experiencing, so we know how to ask the questions and we know how to be able to support people. It's so essential that we start using this language in our everyday consultations, because I can guarantee you there will be a massive population of people who are having these issues but either don't know how to talk about them with you or don't realise that they can. So it's really essential that we start becoming literate in this emotional language with our clients. So we've already published Diabetes Burnout, that came out last year. And the kind of feedback that we're having from staff is that they're really useful conversation starters. It's those people where you feel like they might be struggling, but you're not quite sure in what way. It starts to give people a language, because often phrases like diabetes burnout aren't particularly well known. And so for a lot of people, they're saying, actually, it's a thing. I didn't know it was a thing. And having a name, having a phrase, having a language for it can be really, really empowering. We've had feedback from staff that where there's no psychology support available, it feels like they're giving people something. So you're not just sending people away. We know that this might not be a magic answer, but we're doing something. And so people feel like that part of them, the psychological, emotional part of them, is being heard, is being recognised. The feedback that we're having from the people who've used these resources, so the people living with diabetes, is that it makes them feel normal. It makes them feel like they're not the only one. And that is such an important feeling, because people can suffer and isolate themselves and not feel like they can bring this up with anybody, because it's a difficult thing to understand. So just to feel like you're not the only person in this is really, really essential. We had a gentleman recently who said he's got one copy and he's been photocopying it and sending it to friends around the world, which is amazing. So yeah, somewhere in Sweden, there's a photocopied version of Diabetes Burnout. We've also discovered it's been listed in the National Library of Australia, which is a bit random, but yeah, there we are. So far, people do seem to be finding this to be useful and something new. So out today, and at that table at the back, you can go and get your own copies. We've got Not Okay with Needles. So these are the people with mild to moderate needle phobia. It's got the Talking Type 1 banner, but it's not just for type 1. You can use this for people with any insulin-treated diabetes, and it's clearly written all the way through that it's not just about type 1. So it says mild to moderate needle phobia. So the people that really don't feel okay, but could just about do it if I really tried and had a lot of preparation. Probably not the people that run screaming from the building. They need a bit more help, but the people that find it a real struggle. And what we're doing there is looking at the causes of phobia, the things a person does that might be keeping it going. And the primary goal of that booklet is to be able to get people to a place where they feel more comfortable doing their insulin, doing their blood tests, and they can go for the scarier blood checks and vaccinations with much reduced anxiety. So, my tips for using them. Read them. If you are giving them out and you haven't read them yourself, that is not okay. You need to know what is in these. You wouldn't prescribe an insulin without knowing what was in it. It's really important that you know what's in these. Sell them. you are in a position where you have a relationship with this person. You wouldn't give somebody an insulin going, well, it might be okay, I don't really know much about it. Someone said it's cheap, so have a go. They're not going to want to take it. So you need to be able to sell this to a person. It's called the credibility of the message giver. So your relationship with that person will impact on how they feel about using this, because we know people need to be quite motivated to get the best out of these resources. So if you're able to say to them, this is a really good resource, it's about a really common issue, I've supported lots of people with this, and it's written by a specialist diabetes psychologist, and we've only got it in Wales, it's a really special thing. People are going to start thinking, oh yeah, it's actually, I might have a look at that, it's quite good. Link them to the person's own issues. And what I would really, really recommend, because people can feel a little bit intimidated by sort of how shiny and clean it is, in the clinic with them, write on it. Write their name on the front. And there's on both the burnout and the needle phobia resources, there's a checklist. So if you've had these issues, tick here. Do that with the person in clinic. So they leave feeling like this belongs to them. It's not some book that's been thrust at them. This is personally applicable to me, and so I'm going to use it. And by you writing on it, it liberates that person to then interact with the written elements of the book, because each book has lots of sections where people will write their own experiences in, and it makes a truly individualized intervention for the person. Put them out in your clinic room, not the waiting room. So if you have them out in your clinic room, A, you're more likely to remember about them, and B, the person will be able to see them. And if they're not the kind of person that would routinely raise emotional issues in your consultation, if they see that, that might be giving them permission to say, actually, this is an issue for me, and they'll start coming forwards with things. And if you have the option, put them out in your clinic room in a way that looks nice. If they're in a big skanky pile, people aren't going to be attracted to them. So we want them to look as good as we possibly can. We do need to be mindful of literacy levels. It's not something that can be assumed. So if you have any indication that a person might struggle with their reading or their writing, you might want to either offer them more support with this or find a way to adapt it with those people. We can't assume that everybody will be able to understand what's going on in the booklet. I'd let other people know if you've prescribed this to somebody, put it in a letter to the GP, let the rest of the team know, because we don't want somebody getting this from multiple angles, but it's a psychological intervention that you're providing. So it needs to be listed that somebody is having that intervention. It's really important that we offer support and follow-up. So what I would routinely suggest is that you would either book them in for a follow-up appointment where we'll just quickly go through, okay, how was that? Was there anything really interesting in there? Was there anything that you found difficult? That doesn't need to be a face-to-face either. That could be a phone call. If you're doing a phone call, I'd suggest having the booklet in front of you as well. So if they're saying that thing on page 7 really struck home, you kind of need to know what's on page 7. And that's really important, because we don't want people to feel like they're just being handed a booklet and then shoved out the door. They need to know that actually this is some work that we're going to be doing together. You're not in this alone, and I'm going to support you with it. And then please, please, please let us know what your thoughts and your feedback are on this. This is a very new thing that we're doing. So we need to know from the diabetes teams what's working well and what we need to be changing. So please don't ignore them. It would be a crying shame if these just end up getting dusty in a cupboard somewhere. If there's a reason why they're not working for you, we need to know what they are, because we can look at things like developing training programs if that's what you need, or we can look at adapting the resources. We need to know what the barriers are and what's working. Please don't feel unqualified to use these. If you are someone who can sit in a room with somebody while they're crying and not completely freak out, you can do this. This is fine, okay? These are really common issues. It's not the kind of situation that would generally open somebody up to making big, scary disclosures or anything like that. It's a program of managing diabetes. And if you are capable of advising somebody on taking insulin, you're capable of advising them on managing their stress with diabetes. It's really, really important that this is everybody's business. This isn't just down to a psychologist in your team to deliver these, it's for everyone. Please don't forget about older people. I know I already said that, but I have a suspicion that there is a big hidden population of older people, particularly with type 1, who have been very distressed for a very long time, but got very good at hiding it. So I think if you start asking questions, you will tend to uncover more and more. Don't give them out without reading them first. I think I've already covered that one. Don't leave them out in the waiting room. I know that this has been happening in some areas. If they're out in the waiting room, yeah, great, people will be interested and pick them up, but you need to know who in your client load is experiencing this issue, and you need to know who's picking them up, because those people will need more support from you. Clinic room, yes. Waiting room, no. I really wouldn't advise posting them out to someone without having discussed it first. So don't go through your waiting list and think, oh, he's not come for ages. Have a burnout book. They won't look at it. You need to be there to sell it to them first. And please don't think that this is a replacement for a diabetes psychologist in your service. This is about taking some of the more straightforward work out, but there is so much complex work. There is so much additional support that's needed, and we really need diabetes teams shouting as loudly as we can for more diabetes psychology. So, needle phobia is available today. Coming later this year, we've got diabetes burnout for parents and carers, which has been written with a just amazing group of people who look after kids living with type 1. And it has been such an eye-opener to understand the level of stress and distress that these parents are going through, but they just keep it together, and it is incredible. So this is coming out later this year, and is full of tips and techniques for how, as a busy parent or carer with this child, how you can keep yourself going and how you can work together. And we've got some particular strategies for the difficult teenage years, how you can work together to support that young person's emotional health while keeping yourself going as well. As part of that, we're going to have a book for younger children called How to Manage a Mammoth, which we're having professionally illustrated. So it's going to be about a little boy called Jake, who lives with his mum, and Mel, the diabetes mammoth, who has been living with them since he was 3. And so Jake's a normal kid. He likes Lego, he likes football, he likes school. And most of the time, Mel just sort of shuffles around in the background, but sometimes Mel can be a real problem, and then he gets a bit bigger. So there's all sorts of pictures of Jake sort of playing football, and he's got to carry Mel around as he's getting increasingly hypo, because Mel's really big and sweaty and kind of gross. But the problem is that the more Mel becomes a problem, the bigger he gets, and the bigger he gets, and the bigger he gets, until he becomes a mammoth problem and takes up Jake's entire house. And Jake and his mum are on different sides of the room, and they can't get to each other because Mel is in the middle. And it's all about how Jake and his mum work with the diabetes team and their other friends who live with diabetes. So he's got a little friend called Anisha who lives with Sid, the diabetes hedgehog, who gets grumpy and like shoots spines across the room. But it's all about, with the diabetes team, how they create a plan to work together to shrink Mel back down. And Mel doesn't go away because he's part of Jake and part of Jake's family. He gets to a nice little pocket size. And then it's all about being able to get this idea of acceptance in at a really, really early age. And it's got an activity section at the back where the child will draw out their own diabetes creature and what happens when it becomes a problem, and how does everyone else in their family feel, and what are your super strengths and skills that you can use, and if you were making a shrinking plan, what would you need to do? So it's all about being able to get the parent and child to start talking about their emotions and acceptance and the issues that it causes in their family. So it's getting that psychological well-being in as early as we possibly can. And then coming in 2020, We are going to have handling hypos for those people who've had a really nasty hypo, got really scared, and then run way high to stay out of it. We're going to have living with complications. And I'm still not convinced on the title of this one. This one's accepting diabetes. This is for people, you know, about 6 months after diagnosis, they've got their heads around managing the diabetes and then the emotions hit. So it's about getting over that initial really big whack of emotions that suddenly turn up a few months after diagnosis. Further on, we're aware there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. If anybody can think of a really good way to measure outcomes for this, please come and find me in the break, because we really need to think about how we can prove this is working for people. We can prove it's being disseminated and it's being used, but it's proving that it's actually got those hard outcomes. Thinking about maybe doing something with body image and promoting positive feelings about food, so sort of protecting against the eating disorder side of things. Talking type 2 maybe. Thinking about resources that diabetes staff might need to help you use this effectively, and potentially looking at things like a website, because we've been having lots and lots of inquiries from teens in England and people around the world who want to buy this. So it's thinking about how we can use this to generate income back into NHS Wales so it can start paying for itself. So please, my email address is at the bottom here. I need to know what you think about this. So please feel free to get in contact with me. Tell me what's working. Tell me if it's making an impact in your teams. Tell me what the problem areas are. Tell me where it's being difficult. And what would you need to help you feel more confident using them? What would help you to deliver this in the best way that you can? And if you've got any ideas about what else we should write about, we would absolutely love to hear them, because this is something that we'd like to keep going for as long as we can.